Thank you for tuning in to leaddeveloper.com, where we simplify complex property development feasibilities, investment analysis, and everything real estate. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, our Google Sheets-based feasibility suite streamlines the toughest aspects of real estate. Lead Developer Feasibility Suite is trusted by thousands in over 17 countries. Our tools cover everything from quick assessments to detailed cash flow projections and more. Sign up today at leaddeveloper.com for unlimited free access to our expanding library of real estate tools. No credit card needed. Plus, get full support through Edge with step-by-step guidance, exclusive courses, and resources designed for your success. Turn numbers into narratives that win over investors and lenders. Join Lead Developer now.
All right, time to jump into the ultimate construction financing cheat sheet. This deep dive is really for anyone who's thinking about property development, or maybe just wants to get a handle on how construction financing actually works. It's a whole world unto itself. We'll be looking at some really interesting stuff like how overfunding can sometimes be a smart move to reduce risk, and also how the inspecting engineer can literally make or break your whole project.
Exactly. And we'll see how it's not just about getting a loan. This is a whole different game compared to traditional financing.
So let's start with the basics then. What actually is construction financing?
Basically, it's a special type of loan that's meant to cover the costs of building something, or doing major renovations on a property. And unlike a regular mortgage, which looks at the final value, construction financing focuses on funding the project in stages as it moves along.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a ton of paperwork before those funds start coming in. What kind of documents do lenders want to see?
Oh, they want to see it all. Detailed architectural plans, electrical layouts, HVAC designs, you name it. And then you've got the specifications, literally hundreds of pages spelling out every single material and every construction technique that's going to be used. And these have to line up with industry standards, like the Construction Specifications Institute, or CSI. System.
Oh, that's incredibly detailed. Is it really necessary to go into that much detail?
Absolutely. You got to see it from the lender's side. They're essentially taking a gamble on a project that doesn't even exist yet, right? So they have to be totally sure that everything's clearly spelled out and that there won't be any surprises popping up later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, we've got all our paperwork sorted. What's the next hurdle?
Well, you have to choose your construction approach. There are 4 main ways to go. Construction management. Then there's risk-based construction management, and design bid build, and then design build.
4 approaches, wow. What are the main differences between them, and how do they actually impact the financing?
Okay, so with construction management and the risk-based version, you've got separate teams for the design and the construction. It's more of a traditional approach where the developer's in charge of each stage. Then there's design bid build, where you've got an architect handling both the design and the construction, which can be efficient. But it does mean a lot of power is concentrated in one place.
A lot riding on that architect's shoulders. What about design build? You mentioned that's becoming more popular.
Exactly. It's all about collaboration. The developer, the architect, and the general contractor all work together from the very beginning. It really streamlines the whole process. And what's really interesting is that the general contractor often takes on the risk of any cost overruns.
Ah, so they're incentivized to stick to the budget then. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've picked our approach. What's next?
The construction contract. It's a super important document that outlines everyone's roles and responsibilities. And this is where another key player comes in, the lender's consulting engineer.
The lender has their own engineer. What do they do?
Well, they're basically the lender's eyes and ears on the project. They review the plans, the budget, and the contracts just to make sure everything lines up with the lender's expectations. They're looking for any potential red flags that could put the loan or even the whole project at risk.
So it's like a second layer of scrutiny. I bet that can sometimes cause friction between the borrower and the engineer.
Oh, definitely. It's like having a financial auditor always looking over your shoulder. But for the project to succeed, the borrower and the engineer really have to have a good working relationship.
Because they both ultimately want the same thing, right? To see the project get finished successfully.
Exactly. Open communication is key. The engineer can actually offer valuable insights and help avoid those costly mistakes. A collaborative approach makes the whole thing smoother and less stressful for everyone.
I can see how that would be a big help. So let's recap. We've got our plans, our approach, our contract, and hopefully a good relationship with the engineer. What's next in this construction financing adventure?
Well, next comes coordination. It's often overlooked, but it's absolutely crucial for managing a construction project. And this is where the construction manager steps in. They're the ones making sure all the different parts are working together smoothly. The different trades, the materials, deliveries, the timelines, everything.
I can imagine that's like juggling 100 things at once. How do they keep track of everything?
They use tools like bar charts, which visually map out the entire project timeline. It helps them figure out the critical path, those tasks that have to be done on time, or else the whole project gets delayed.
So one little delay can have a domino effect on everything else.
Exactly. But even with perfect planning and a fantastic construction manager, there's one crucial step that can make or break a project before anything even starts.
Now I'm curious, what's this make or break step?
The environmental report. It's essential to do a full assessment of the property before any construction begins.
That makes a lot of sense.
Great.
You wouldn't want to dig up some hidden environmental problem halfway through. What are they looking for in this report?
They're checking for anything that could be a risk to the project or the people involved, contaminated soil, asbestos, anything that could mean costly cleanup or cause major delays.
So it's about protecting both the project and the people. And I bet getting these things sorted out early can save a lot of headaches and expense later on.
Absolutely. It's all about due diligence, making sure the construction process runs smoothly.
We've covered a lot of ground here. Plans, approaches, contracts, coordination, even environmental reports. It's clear there's a lot of preparation involved in construction financing.
We have, and believe it or not, that was just the beginning. The real action kicks in when those construction loan advances start coming through, and that's where we'll pick up next time.
Can't wait for that. Back soon with more from the Ultimate Construction Financing Cheat Sheet. All right, welcome back. Last time we were talking about that environmental report, a crucial step before any construction can actually begin. But now let's get into the really exciting part, the construction loan advances. So how does that whole process actually work? Is it just a free-for-all once the loan's been approved?
Oh, not at all. Construction loan advances are super carefully managed, and the lender's consulting engineer is still a key player here.
Right. The lender's watchful eye. So walk me through it. What happens when a borrower needs funds?
Well, the borrower will submit a request detailing all the work that's been completed and the costs they've incurred. And then the inspecting engineer goes out to the site to verify everything. They look at the progress, check for any problems, and make sure all the stored materials are properly accounted for. And based on all that, they write up a report for the lender.
So it's like a progress report, but with an extra level of scrutiny.
Exactly. This report is crucial for the lender before they release any money. It helps them make sure the project is moving along as planned and that the money's being used correctly.
Now, I know there's a difference between hard costs and soft costs in construction. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Hard costs are those tangible things you see on the construction site, like the materials, the labor, the actual building activities. Soft costs, on the other hand, are kind of the behind-the-scenes expenses, things like architectural fees, legal fees, insurance, permits, all that good stuff.
So hard costs are the bricks and mortar, and soft costs are those essential but less visible expenses.
Precisely. And they're treated a bit differently when it comes to the advances. Hard costs are usually advanced based on the actual work that's been done, the stuff the inspecting engineer verifies. Soft costs, though, they might need more documentation, like paid invoices and such, because they're not as easy to just, check on site.
Makes sense. It's all about accountability and transparency, right? Speaking of protecting the lender's investment, you mentioned title continuation in the last part. Can you expand on that a bit?
Of course. So remember, the property itself is the security for the construction loan. Title continuation makes sure that the lender stays in a top position, in terms of any claims against the property.
So if something goes wrong, the lender is first in line to get their investment back.
Exactly. With each advance, the lender typically does a title search to see if there are any new liens or encumbrances. Let's say, for example, a contractor files a lien because they haven't been paid. Title continuation ensures that the lender's claim comes before that new lien, protecting their investment.
Ah, that clears it up. It's like a regular checkup to make sure the lender's security interest is still solid. Now, another term I've heard a lot in construction is retainage. What exactly is that?
Retainage is basically a percentage, usually about 10% of each payment that the owner holds back. So let's imagine a project that costs $1 million. With a 10% retainage, the contractor would get $900,000 during the construction phase. And that remaining $100,000 would be released once the project's completely finished and approved.
So it's kind of a security deposit and make sure the contractor finishes the work properly and deals with any outstanding issues.
You got it. It's a safety net for the owner. That retainage is usually held back until everything is done, even those little finishing touches, the punch list items.
But is the retainage always held back until the very end?
Not necessarily, no.
Mm-hmm.
It can be reduced as the project goes along using a couple of different methods, like percentage of completion or contractor by contractor release. So as each milestone is reached or a specific contractor wraps up their work, some of the retainage might be released, but only if they've met all the requirements and sign a lien waiver.
Those lien waivers seem pretty crucial in all this.
Absolutely. It's basically a document where the contractor says they've been paid in full, and they won't file any liens against the property. It protects both the owner and the lender.
So this is all about making sure everyone's on the same page and avoiding those surprise claims later on. Now, what about those materials that are delivered to the site but not actually installed yet? How does that all work?
That brings us to another interesting point, funding for storage materials. It can be a bit tricky because those materials haven't actually been used in the project yet, right?
Yeah, I can see that there's the risk of damage or theft. So how do lenders typically approach this?
Well, they usually have some specific requirements to minimize those risks. They want to be sure that the materials are insured, that they're secure, and that it's clear they belong to the project. Whether the materials are stored on-site or off-site, the lender needs to verify ownership, insurance, and all the security measures.
So it's a careful balance of trust, but verify.
It is. Clear communication and thorough documentation are key.
Now I'm curious about something else. Do lenders always advance the exact amount that the borrower asks for?
That's a great question. And it leads us to that interesting concept we talked about earlier. Overfunding versus underfunding. And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the ultimate construction financing cheat sheet. We've covered a ton of ground, from planning all the way to managing those construction loan advances. But now I got to hear more about this overfunding versus underfunding thing.
It's a pretty interesting part of construction financing, and it often surprises people. See, there's this common idea that lenders always want to underfund projects.
Yeah, that seems logical on the surface, right? Less money going out, less risk for the lender.
You'd think so, but it doesn't always work that way. Underfunding can actually make things riskier in the long run.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. If a project is always short on cash, it can cause a whole bunch of problems. Delays, people cutting corners, tense relationships with the contractors. It just turns into a bad cycle that puts the entire project in jeopardy.
So underfunding can actually create instability and make the lender's risk higher. That's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you explain it like that. Okay, so what about overfunding then? Is that something that happens often?
It's not as common as you might think, but sometimes a little bit of overfunding can be a smart move. It's all about finding the right balance, what they call keeping the loan in balance.
I like that, keeping the loan in balance. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means making sure the project has enough money from both equity and debt to stay on track and finish on time. It's about keeping things financially stable throughout the whole construction process.
So it's not just about throwing extra cash at the project. It's about carefully managing that money to make sure things go smoothly and the project's a success.
You got it. And that takes close cooperation between the lender and the borrower, keeping a close eye on the budget, and being ready to adjust if needed. Think of it like sailing a ship. You need enough wind to keep moving, but you also got to adjust the sails to handle the changing conditions.
Great analogy. So let's say a project runs into a problem and needs more funds than originally planned. What happens then?
In a perfect world, the borrower would have enough equity to cover those extra costs. But if not, the lender might ask for more equity to be put in. Or they could try to rearrange the budget. Shifting funds from areas with a surplus to cover the shortfall.
So being flexible and creative to keep things moving forward.
Exactly. And sometimes the lender might even put extra funds into a special account, specifically for a particular purpose.
What's the thinking behind that?
It adds another layer of control and accountability. Those funds are only released for very specific things, and they're tracked carefully to make sure they're used properly. Any leftover money can then be given back to the borrower.
So it's like a safety net with built-in checks and balances.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about handling those construction loan advances carefully, being flexible, and having that shared commitment to seeing the project succeed.
Well, this deep dive into construction financing has been amazing. I feel like I have a much better grasp of all the details and the strategic thinking that goes into it.
It's a fascinating world, and it's always changing. It's been great exploring it with you.
Likewise. And for our listeners who are keen to learn more, we definitely recommend checking out the source material for this episode, The Ultimate Construction Financing Cheat Sheet. You'll find links to more resources and info in the show notes.
And don't forget, whether you're thinking about your own construction project or just curious about how it all works, understanding the ins and outs of construction financing can really help you make smarter decisions.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into construction financing. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those construction dreams alive.